May 9th, 1945, Berchtesgaden. American soldiers of the 101st Airborne find Emmy Goering in the Grand Hotel, still wearing her emerald necklace, still expecting diplomatic immunity. Her husband sits in Allied custody 300 miles north. The Thousand-Year Reich died 8 days ago. 3 questions remain unanswered. What happens to the women who shared beds with the architects of genocide? How do you rebuild a life when your husband's name means murder? Where do you go when an entire nation wants to forget you exist? For 12 years, these women lived as Nazi royalty. They attended state dinners in the Chancellery, vacationed in stolen castles, wore jewelry seized from Jewish families across Europe. They raised children in villas built on slave labor, hosted tea parties while trains rolled toward death camps 30 miles away. Now Germany lies in ruins. Their husbands face war crimes, tribunals, and they must answer for their own survival in a world that views them as accomplices to the greatest evil in modern history. Emmy Goering, born Emmy Sonnemann in Hamburg in 1893, built her pre-war reputation as a stage actress before meeting Hermann Goering at a Weimar charity gala in 1932. By 1935, she stood beside the Reichsmarschall at the apex of Nazi power, mistress of Karenhall, the massive hunting lodge Hermann, filled with stolen art worth millions. She hosted foreign diplomats, collected Renaissance paintings ripped from Jewish collections, and mothered Etta, born in 1938, amid fanfare that treated the birth like a state occasion. May 9th, 1945 shattered that world forever. Captain Robert Stack of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment places Emmy under arrest at 14:30 hours in the hotel's marble lobby. She carries 3 suitcases of clothing, a jewelry case worth $40,000, and a letter from her husband begging American protection for his family. The letter fails. June 30th, 1945. Emmy enters Straubing prison for denazification proceedings, charged with profiting from Nazi policies and supporting regime activities. The Allied Tribunal in Munich reviews her case across 18 months of testimony. Witnesses describe her presence at Karenhall during meetings where Hermann discussed slave labor quotas for aircraft factories. Former servants testify about her knowledge of stolen artworks displayed throughout their estate. Banco. Records show luxury purchases made with funds traced to Jewish property seizures. Defense lawyers argue she remained ignorant of her husband's crimes, focused solely on domestic life and charity work. March 21st, 1948. The court sentences Emmy to 1 year in prison, already served during proceedings, plus 30% seizure of remaining assets. She walks free but homeless. Karenhall lies demolished by Hermann's own dynamite in April 1945. Their Berlin mansion became Allied headquarters. Swiss bank accounts remain frozen indefinitely. Emmy rebuilds in obscurity. 1950. She rents a modest apartment in Munich's Schwabing district, earning money by selling personal items at flea markets. Former social connections vanish overnight. Theater directors refuse auditions. Her name ensures unemployment in post-war German entertainment. 1952. She works as a seamstress in a textile factory under the assumed name Emma Schneider, earning 75 marks monthly. Etta Goering, now 14, attends a Munich boarding school under strict privacy rules. Classmates remain unaware of her parentage until 1953, when a teacher recognizes her surname during roll call. The revelation forces another school transfer, the 4th since 1945. Margarete Himmler faces harsher justice in different circumstances. Born Margarete Boden in Bromberg in 1893, she married Heinrich Himmler in 1928, becoming the Reichsfuhrer SS's wife during his rise to control over concentration camps, Einsatzgruppen, and the entire SS apparatus. She lived quietly at their Gmund estate while Heinrich orchestrated the Holocaust from Berlin, managing household affairs and raising their daughter Gudrun, born in 1929. May 23, 1945. British forces arrest Margarete at the Gmund house during a routine sweep for Nazi officials. Intelligence officers find correspondence between Heinrich and Margarete discussing special actions in occupied territories using coded language that investigators later connect to mass murder operations. A diary entry from October 1943 references Heinrich's difficult work in the East and her pride in his historical mission. The British internment camp at Recklinghausen holds Margarete for 31 months. Interrogators focus on her knowledge of Heinrich's activities and her access to stolen property discovered at Gmund, including silver candlesticks marked with Hebrew inscriptions and oil paintings missing from Dutch museums since 1942. December 12, 1947, Margaret's denazification trial in Dachau reviews evidence of her complicity in war crimes. Prosecutors present letters showing her requests for luxury items from Heinrich, coinciding with dates of major deportation operations. Former Gmund staff testify about her discussions of inferior races and her approval of SS policies. The 3-judge panel deliberates 6 hours. The verdict: 4 years imprisonment plus complete asset forfeiture. Margarete serves the full sentence at Landsberg prison, the same facility where Adolf Hitler wrote Mein Kampf in 1924. She works in the prison laundry, earning 30 Pfennig daily while appealing her conviction through German courts. August 30th, 1951, Margarete walks free, age 58, with no property, no income, and a daughter who barely remembers her. Gudrun, now 22, has spent 6 years in foster care, forbidden from visiting her mother during imprisonment. Their reunion occurs in a Munich church, arranged by Catholic charity workers. If you value documented Doberreljut and post-war history, like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Now back to the story. Mother and daughter share a one-room apartment in Munich's Sendling district, subsidized by church relief funds. Margarete works cleaning offices at night, invisible labor that pays enough for basic survival. She never speaks publicly about Heinrich or the SS. Neighbors know her as Greta Bauer, a war widow from East Prussia. Ilse Hess endures the longest ordeal of all Nazi wives, tethered to a husband who will never come home. Born Ilse Prühl in Wunsiedel in 1900, she married Rudolf Hess in 1927, linking her fate to Hitler's most fanatical deputy. Rudolf's bizarre flight to Scotland in May 1941, attempting solo peace negotiations, left Ilse managing their estate and raising their son, Wolf Rudiger, alone while her husband sat in British custody. May 5, 1945. American forces place Ilse under house arrest at the family villa in Hindelang, treating her as a potential intelligence asset due to Rudolf's high party position. Officers search the property for documents about Nazi leadership, dynamics, and Rudolf's psychological state before his Scotland mission. They find detailed diaries describing Rudolf's obsession with astrology, his vegetarian diet experiments, and his growing paranoia about British bombing campaigns. The Allied Control Council debates Rudolf's fate while Ilse remains in limbo. The Nuremberg trials commence October 20th, 1945, with Rudolf as a major defendant despite his 4-year absence from Nazi decision-making. His lawyer argues insanity. Prosecutors demand death. Ilse attends court sessions when permitted, watching her husband display obvious mental deterioration, frequently reading novels during testimony about genocide. October 1st, 1946. The tribunal sentences Rudolf to life imprisonment, sending him to Spandau prison in Berlin. Ilse learns his fate through radio broadcasts, not official notification. The verdict denies her any conjugal visits, any telephone contact, any correspondence beyond brief, censored letters examined by 4-power prison authorities. Ilse fights for Rudolf's release across 4 decades, 1950. She files appeals with American, British, French, and Soviet authorities, arguing Rudolf's mental incapacity makes continued imprisonment pointless. All 4 powers reject her petitions. 1955. She publishes Prisoner of Peace, defending Rudolf's Scotland flight as heroic peace attempt, not treasonous abandonment. British libel laws forced German publishers to withdraw the book within 6 months. 60. Ilse organizes an international campaign for Rudolf's release, collecting signatures from former Wehrmacht officers, Catholic priests, and right-wing politicians across West Germany. The petition reaches 43,000 names before British authorities threaten prosecution for Nazi rehabilitation activities. Wolf Rudiger Hess, now 33, joins his mother's campaign in 1968, writing letters to world leaders arguing his father's continued imprisonment violates humanitarian principles. The letters reach Queen Elizabeth, President Nixon, and Soviet Premier Brezhnev. All replies politely refuse intervention in Spandau prison administration. Lena Heydrich navigates different survival challenges after losing her husband to Czech resistance bullets in 1942. Born Lena von Osten in 1911, she married Reinhard Heydrich in 1931, becoming wife to the architect of the final solution, the man who chaired the Wannsee Conference that systematized Holocaust logistics. Their marriage produced 4 children before Czech partisans ambushed Reinhard in Prague, June 4th, 1942. Hitler's regime guaranteed Lena a generous war widow's pension, financing comfortable life in their Fehmarn Island estate while Reinhard's successors continued his genocide programs. May 1945 ends those payments forever. British forces arrest Lena on Fehmarn, charging her with receiving stolen property and supporting criminal organizations. The British internment facility on Fehmarn holds Lena 8 months while investigators catalog evidence of her complicity in SS activities. Household records show her managing finances derived from confiscated Jewish property. Personal correspondence with Reinhard discusses resettlement actions in occupied territories using euphemisms that post-war investigators connect to mass murder operations. January 23, 1946. Lena's denazification trial in Hamburg reviews her knowledge of Reinhard's crimes and her use of blood money for family. Expenses. Prosecutors present evidence of luxury purchases coinciding with major deportation operations. Defense lawyers argue she remained focused on domestic responsibilities, unaware of her husband's professional activities beyond general SS duties. The verdict splits the difference. 18 months imprisonment, already served, plus 50%, asset seizure. Lena retains half their Fehmarn property, but loses the Prague villa, the Berlin apartment, and all Swiss financial accounts. Her 4 children, ages 3 to 12, have lived with relatives during her imprisonment. Lena rebuilds through strategic silence. 1948. She operates a small boarding house on Fehmarn, serving tourists who remain unaware of her Nazi connections. Guest registers show visitors from Hamburg, Berlin, and Copenhagen paying modest rates for basic accommodation. The business provides enough income for family survival without luxury. 1952. Lena remarries Finnish theater director Mauno Manninen, taking his surname and moving to Kouvola, Finland. Finnish authorities know her history but grant residency permits anyway, viewing her as reformed war widow rather than Nazi collaborator. The name change provides anonymity impossible in Germany. Her children adapt differently to post-war realities. Klaus Heydrich joins the West German Navy in 1960, serving 15 years while avoiding publicity about his parentage. Heider Heydrich becomes a cabaret musician, performing under stage name Harry Hyde to escape family notoriety. Silke and Marta Heydrich marry young, taking husbands' surnames to disappear into middle-class anonymity. Gerda Bormann never faces post-war justice, dying of cancer in March 1946, while her husband Martin controls Hitler's access and builds personal power as Nazi gatekeeper. Born Gerda Buch in 1909, she married Martin in 1929, bearing 10 children while he accumulated influence through proximity to Hitler, rather than independent Nazi leadership. Their Obersalzberg estate became a center of Nazi power during wartime, hosting Hitler's daily strategy sessions, while Gerda managed domestic arrangements for the Führer's entourage. She died believing Germany would still achieve victory, never witnessing her husband's flight from Berlin or his mysterious disappearance during Soviet advances. Gerda's children face orphan status in occupied Germany. Martin vanishes May 2nd, 1945, during breakout attempts from Hitler's bunker, leaving his offspring scattered across Bavarian relatives with no financial support and toxic parentage. American occupation forces placed the children in foster care while investigating Martin's war crimes role. 48. West German courts declare Martin Bormann dead in absentia, enabling his children to claim modest inheritance from pre-Nazi property holdings. The money provides basic education but no luxury. All 10 children eventually take different surnames, disappearing into post-war German society under assumed identities. Adolf Hitler Jr., Bormann's eldest son, serves in the French Foreign Legion from 1958 to 1963, fighting in Algeria under the name Henri Dupont. Military records show competent service with no disciplinary issues. He settles in Austria after discharge, working as a hotel manager while avoiding all contact with family members. Irmgard Bormann, the only daughter, becomes a Catholic nun in 1954, joining a contemplative order in Bavaria that requires complete renunciation of family ties. Sister Maria Benedicta never speaks publicly about her parentage, spending 40 years in monastic silence until her death in 1994. Elisabeth Huss faces judgment alongside her husband's crimes at Auschwitz concentration camp, born Elizabeth. Hensel in 1905. She married Rudolf Huss in 1929, moving to Auschwitz in 1940 when Rudolf became commandant of the expanding extermination complex. She managed the family villa located directly adjacent to the camp, raising 5 children while her husband supervised the murder of over 1 million people. May 11th, 1945. British forces arrest Elizabeth at the Huss family villa, finding her still living within sight of Auschwitz gas chambers that stopped operating 6 months earlier. Military intelligence officers discover household records showing her detailed knowledge of camp operations, including correspondence with Rudolf about processing quotas and special actions. The British military tribunal in Lüneburg reviews Elizabeth's case alongside Rudolf's war crimes trial. Evidence shows her frequent visits to camp administrative offices, her supervision of prisoner labor details working in the family garden, and her use of clothing and household items stolen from murdered victims. Prosecutors. Present testimony from surviving Auschwitz prisoners who worked as servants in the Huss villa. Former inmates describe Elizabeth's knowledge of daily killing operations, her comments about inferior races, and her casual discussions of murder statistics during family meals. One witness recalls her complaint about inefficient transport, schedules, delaying prisoner deliveries. September 15th, 1947. The tribunal sentences Elizabeth to 4 years imprisonment for war crimes complicity, rejecting defense arguments about feminine ignorance of husband's professional duties. She serves the full sentence at Royal Prison while Rudolf faces execution in Poland for genocide crimes. 51. Elizabeth emerges from prison to discover Rudolf executed by Polish authorities in April 1947, hanged at Auschwitz beside the crematoriums where he supervised mass murder. Their 5 children have lived in church orphanages during her imprisonment, forbidden from visiting either parent during trials. Elizabeth disappears into Bavaria's displaced persons population, working as a domestic servant for families unaware of her identity. She adopts the name Elsa Hermann, claiming war widow status from East Prussian refugee background. The deception works until 1960, when a former Auschwitz survivor recognizes her at a Munich market. The recognition forces another relocation to rural Austria, where Elizabeth works as a seamstress until arthritis forces retirement in 1975. She receives minimal state pension under her assumed identity, living in a one-room apartment until her death in 1989, age 84. Her children scatter across different continents to escape family notoriety. Klaus Huss emigrates to Australia in 1955, working as a mechanical engineer under the surname Hoffman. He marries a local woman who never learns his real parentage. Brigitte Huss moves to Canada in 1957, becoming a school teacher in Saskatchewan while hiding her father's crimes from colleagues and students. Irmgard Huss joins a Lutheran missionary organization in 1959, spending 30 years in African medicals clinics while never discussing her family background with fellow missionaries. She dies of malaria in Tanzania in 1989, having spent more years serving African communities than she lived in the Auschwitz villa. The wives' post-war fates reveal patterns across Nazi elite families. Those who cooperated with Allied investigations often received lighter sentences but faced permanent social exile. Those who maintained silence about their husbands' crimes sometimes achieved anonymity but lived in constant fear of exposure. None returned to pre-war social status. All lost property, privilege, and public identity. Financial records from Allied restitution programs show the scope of Nazi wives' stolen wealth. Emmy Goering's jewelry collection, valued at $200,000 in 1945, contained items traced to Jewish families across 6 countries. Lena Heydrich's bank accounts held money directly transferred from SS confiscation operations in Czechoslovakia and Poland. Property seizures extended beyond obvious luxury items. Allied investigators cataloged paintings, sculptures, books, furniture, clothing, and kitchen utensils stolen from murdered families. Many Nazi wives used these items daily, serving dinner on china seized from Jewish households, wearing jewelry torn from concentration camp victims, sleeping in beds confiscated from deported families. The children of Nazi leaders faced different challenges adapting to post-war realities. Some, like Wolf Rudiger Hess, embraced their father's ideologies and spent decades defending Nazi policies. Others completely rejected family history, changing names, and emigrating to distant countries where their parentage remained unknown. Educational opportunities varied significantly. Children of executed war criminals often received church charity, assistance for basic schooling, but rarely advanced to university education. Children of imprisoned leaders sometimes benefited from international relief organizations, but faced discrimination when their identities became known. Marriage prospects proved particularly difficult for Nazi children. Many potential spouses rejected relationships after learning family backgrounds. Some Nazi offspring married within similar circles, creating communities of shared historical burden. Others concealed their parentage from spouses, living with permanent deception about their childhood experiences. Professional careers required constant vigilance about identity exposure. Several Nazi children succeeded in business, medicine, and academia while hiding their family connections. Periodic media investigations threatened these carefully constructed new lives, forcing career changes and relocations when historical connections surfaced. The grandchildren generation faces ongoing consequences from Nazi family heritage. Some embrace historical responsibility, participating in Holocaust education programs and reconciliation efforts. Others maintain complete silence about family history, treating grandparents' crimes as irrelevant ancient history that shouldn't affect contemporary life. German legal proceedings continued affecting Nazi families decades after 1945. Property restitution cases extended into the 1980s, requiring Nazi children to return stolen artworks and jewelry to survivor families or their heirs. These legal challenges often revealed family connections that children had successfully hidden for 30 years. International travel remained problematic for Nazi families well into the 1960s. Immigration authorities in Israel, Poland, and Czechoslovakia maintained watch lists preventing entry by war criminals' relatives. Some countries required special permits acknowledging family background before granting visitor visas. Media attention fluctuated across decades, but never disappeared entirely. Documentary filmmakers periodically tracked down Nazi wives and children for interviews about their post-war experiences. Most refused participation, but occasional cooperation provided rare glimpses into their adaptation strategies and psychological coping mechanisms. The wives who survived into the 1980s and 1990s faced renewed scrutiny during Holocaust education expansion in German schools. Their grandchildren often first learned family history through textbook references to their grandfather's crimes, creating generational confrontations about historical responsibility and family shame. Medical records from Allied prison hospitals document the psychological toll on Nazi wives during denazification proceedings. Many exhibited symptoms of severe depression, anxiety disorders, and what modern psychiatry would recognize as post-traumatic stress. Treatment remained limited to basic medical care without psychological counseling services. Social isolation became permanent for most Nazi wives who remained in Germany. Former friends avoided contact to protect their own reputations. New relationships proved impossible when personal histories became known. Many spent final decades in complete solitude, unknown to neighbors and isolated from family members who had changed names and moved away. Religious conversion provided psychological comfort for some Nazi wives, seeking redemption from wartime complicity. Catholic and Protestant organizations offered spiritual counseling while maintaining distance from political rehabilitation efforts. Several wives became deeply religious in final years, attending daily services while never publicly discussing their past. The intelligence services of multiple countries maintained surveillance files on Nazi families throughout the Cold War period. CIA documents declassified in the 1990s reveal monitoring programs tracking the movements and activities of war criminals' relatives, concerned about potential neo-Nazi organizing efforts or intelligence value from family connections. Swiss banking. Investigations in the 1990s uncovered additional financial evidence of Nazi wives' stolen wealth. Dormant accounts contained millions of dollars in assets that banks had held since 1945, earning interest, while families of murder victims remained uncompensated. These discoveries led to new restitution proceedings and media attention for aging Nazi relatives. The fall of communist governments in Eastern Europe after 1989 opened previously classified archives containing additional evidence about Nazi families' wartime activities. Polish, Czech, and Russian documents revealed new details about the scope of property theft and the direct involvement of wives in managing stolen goods. DNA testing technology in the 2000s enabled more precise identification of Nazi family descendants who had changed names and created false identities. Holocaust memorial organizations used genetic evidence to trace family lineages and contact living relatives about their historical inheritance, often surprising individuals who had no knowledge of their Nazi ancestry. Modern computer databases allow researchers to cross-reference wartime documents with post-war records, revealing the full scope of Nazi wives' post-war activities and their success or failure in creating new identities. These investigations continue uncovering previously unknown family connections and hidden wealth transfers. Contemporary German society remains divided about how to address Nazi family legacies. Some advocate complete historical transparency, requiring public acknowledgement of family connections to war criminals. Others support privacy rights for descendants who bear no personal responsibility for previous generations' crimes. Educational programs in German schools now include specific curricula about Nazi families' post-war experiences, examining how ordinary people cope with inherited historical guilt and the multi-generational effects of genocide participation. These programs aim to prevent historical denial while acknowledging the complex human dimensions of collective memory. The last surviving Nazi wives died in the 1990s and 2000s, taking their personal experiences to graves scattered across multiple continents. Their children and grandchildren continue living with inherited consequences from wartime crimes, managing family shame across multiple generations while building independent lives in societies that remember but rarely forgive. Modern memorial practices at Holocaust sites now include specific references to Nazi families' post-war fates, acknowledging that justice extended beyond individual punishment to affect entire family networks across decades of social consequences. These memorials recognize both the scope of historical accountability and the ongoing human costs of genocide participation. Recent academic research examines Nazi families' adaptation strategies as case studies in collective trauma recovery and intergenerational guilt transmission. Sociologists and psychologists study these families to understand how societies process massive historical crimes and whether family connections to perpetrators create permanent social exclusion. The digital age creates new challenges for Nazi family descendants, as internet searches can instantly reveal historical connections that previous generations spent decades hiding. Social media platforms and genealogy websites make family background concealment increasingly difficult, forcing contemporary descendants to confront their inheritance from Nazi crimes. property restitution efforts continue into the 21st century as Holocaust survivor organizations pursue remaining assets held by Nazi families or transferred to post-war heirs. These legal proceedings often involve third and fourth generation family members who inherited wealth without knowledge of its criminal origins, creating contemporary moral dilemmas about historical justice. International cooperation between Holocaust memorial organizations enables global tracking of Nazi family assets and descendants, ensuring that geographical distance cannot provide complete escape from historical accountability. These efforts demonstrate the persistent consequences of genocide participation across multiple generations and continents. The wives of Nazi leaders discovered that shared beds with history's greatest criminals carried costs extending far beyond their husbands' individual punishments. Their children learned that inherited names could become inherited curses. Their grandchildren found that blood connections to genocide create permanent historical burdens that no amount of personal virtue can fully overcome. Yet the final accounting remains incomplete. In 2019, construction workers renovating a Munich apartment building discovered a sealed wall cavity containing jewelry, photographs, and documents belonging to Elizabeth Goering, Emmy's sister-in-law, who died in 1975. The cash included items stolen from Jewish families in Berlin and Vienna, hidden for 74 years, while rightful heirs searched in vain. The jewelry now sits in a police evidence locker, awaiting identification by survivors, grandchildren who may never have known what their families lost.